Is that all right? Can everyone hear me? Is that okay?
Yeah. Are you ready?
Quite nervous.
Ready?
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about how super cheap retailers such as Primark are destroying charity shop fashion. I love charity shops. Everything I'm wearing is from a charity shop. Yeah, you might have guessed. But they're awesome. They're awesome places to be. They've got a great atmosphere and you can find some really, really cool stuff there. So when I say charity shop, I don't just mean RSPCA, I mean things like jumble sales, clothes swaps, all that different sort of things. So when I say Primark, I mean any high street retailer that's very, very cheap, which is most of them. So the joy of charity shops, there's a fantastic atmosphere when you go into a charity shop. Weird smell, good atmosphere. Fantastic history behind them, they help a lot of people, and also they're completely and utterly bizarre. You find things in there that you're never going to find anywhere else. And the fashion itself as well is incredibly unique, it's inexpensive, and you find things in there like C&A and when Marks and Spencer's were good. There's also clothes in there from every era, so there's always something to suit everyone's tastes. But charity shops are also incredibly important for subcultural fashion. Now, subcultural fashion wants to draw something away from the mainstream and wants to provide for something that's a little bit different. And charity shops and second-hand clothes stores are great ways to find the cast-offs of mainstream fashion. So you've got economic reasons, they're very, very cheap, political because you don't want to contribute to this sort of huge economy of waste, and also cultural reasons. So charity shop institutions have been supporting subcultural fashion across the decades. But charity shops are now facing this horrible thing I want to call the Primark curse. Halloween, which is basically now, because there's so much Primark waste that people buy because it's incredibly cheap, it gets shoved into charity shops, and the actual quality of charity shops goes down. There's less unique stock for people to buy, which means there's economic repercussions for the shop. They can't match Primark on a price point at all, even when it's second-hand, and it's more work for volunteers. So you've got a stratification with second-hand retailers. So you've got the charity shops with lots of poor quality tat, and then vintage shops where people price things up to like 500% markup. Plus, the recuperation of subcultures, which I can't go into now, but just talk to me about it afterwards, means that there's this Primark curse, like blighting charity shops across the land. But how have these super cheap retailers sort of come about? Well, there's been a growth in the fashion industry as a whole. Changes to national employment law from the 60s has meant that there's been a move from national to international labour in the textile trade from the 70s. Which means fewer legal restrictions, higher profit margins, rapid manufacture, higher profit margins, and a recent dip in raw material prices also altogether means super cheap retail giants like Primark. But all of this has come about not because of the weather cycle, but because of the increased revolution of the fashion cycle, which is seasonal, in a decade, anything like that. So there's economic and cultural things that have happened because of that fashion revolution. So there's been an increase in disposable income. We've got more money to spend on clothes versus the thing of economic crises. We don't want to spend a lot of money on clothes. Poorly paid labour and quicker, cheaper technology also mean that things travel a lot faster. But also culturally, there's an increase of fashion seasons from say 2 or 4 in the 50s to now all these mini trends and things like that. Developments in advertising and marketing also push this idea that people want to be cool. And lifestyle changes for women. We don't stay at home making clothes anymore, we go out and we buy them. So what's the problem with Primark? Well, it's shit, basically. It's made really badly, the cloth's really bad, the labour is poorly paid and unethical. I'm not saying don't buy from it, I'm just saying think about it. There's a huge environmental impact, and worst of all, you just get generic fashion. So why do we still buy from them? Well, we love a bargain. If we've not got much money to spend, we have to buy from there. We accept fast fashion, we accept the cultural pressures that come along with being cool. And we've forgotten what the story is behind fashion, where our clothes come from and things like that. So to solve these problems, start considering your habits, reduce the amount of consumption you do in Primark and places like that, recycle clothing differently and use charity shops generously. And don't forget as well to educate yourself. So how are your clothes made? Where do they come from? How do you fix things when they fall apart? And also develop eccentricities of fashion. So a really big thing for me, and the whole point of this presentation really, is to rejoice in fashion's multiple narratives. So all your clothing tells a story, where it comes from tells a story, and how you wear it continues that story. So it's very important for me, and that's why charity shops are so fantastic, is because they allow you to take a garment and take it forward in time and forward with the narrative. So I hope you've enjoyed my presentation, and again there were some things I missed out, but do talk to me about them afterwards. and I hope it makes you consider again why we should be using charity shops more judiciously and instead saying no to Primark.